Hey everyone, this is Laura with Laura Godenic Astrology, and I'm here to give you the update for the week of March 16th through the 22nd, 2020. So starting on Monday, the 16th, we have Mercury moving back into the sign of Pisces, which is traditionally known as the sign of its detriment. So this just means that so Mercury represents communication and how we think, our mental processes, potentially even things like travel, short distance travel more specifically. So kind of like your local area. And Pisces is a sign having to do with emotions and dreams and imagination and compassion. And Mercury usually has a goal as a planet to want to dissect, to figure things out, to look for details. And Pisces is more about the big picture and can be a little daydreamy. So that's why Mercury it's called being in the sign of its detriment, because Mercury doesn't really function too well in Pisces. And so Mercury has to be creative in how it can function in the sign of Pisces. And this is usually connected to being very artistic or communicating using a medium of sorts like art or music or poetry, but not necessarily being super clear or detailed with communication or with words. Things can get mixed up, things can get messed up, things can get out of whack. You can get confused. Things can be very unclear very quickly. And Mercury will be traveling back over territory that it just retrograded through, because Mercury was recently retrograde in Pisces. And so now that Mercury is moving direct, moving forward, it's moving back through those same degrees. And so, although there is this re-emphasis of communicating perhaps more through art, through music, through lyrics, poetry, etc., there can also be a sense of confusion, of fogginess, of something being unclear, of maybe even information being unclear. It can be very dreamlike or ambiguous. And so I kind of think this is a bit reflective of the state that we're in right now with the coronavirus is, things are very ambiguous and unclear right now as to the direction that we're headed. I know we're in a state of emergency, but how long will this virus last? How far will it spread? How long is this crisis going to go on for? And this is really reflective of Mercury traveling back through those same degrees of Pisces, of bringing up some confusion and fogginess and ambiguity, and that can really breed fear. So another thing is because Mercury will be passing over those same degrees, topics or things that have come up in your life when Mercury was here before, you might get answers to, or you might have some sort of maybe intuitive conclusion, because Pisces is a sign all about intuition and emotion. So that is Mercury going back into Pisces. And we also have the moon moving into the sign of Capricorn on Monday, and the moon spends about 2 days in a sign. And so the moon will be passing through some really intense territory. Right now we have Saturn and Pluto still in Capricorn, and we have Jupiter and Mars. So we have the two malefics, Mars and Saturn. Mars being the god of war, Saturn is the lord of winter and death, as well as a variety of other things, time, commitment, time and age, maturity, a lot of things. But whenever the moon goes into a new sign, it's kind of triggering those qualities and bringing things into our emotional sphere. So it's kind of the emotional tone of the day, wherever the moon is and whatever aspects it's making. And so the moon's going to be triggering all of this Mars stuff for the next 2 days, starting on the 18th. And it could be even like a precursor or a preview to some of the things that are coming up later on in the week, because there's a lot of activity happening in Capricorn. And so we'll get there as we get to later in the week. But this could just be reflective also of the fear of what's happening right now. Saturn is the planet of fear. It's what we fear. And in the sign of Capricorn, Capricorn represents the systems and structures that we have in our lives so that we can move through the world. It's government, it's rules, it's the regulations that we live by, it's standards we have. So yeah, that's Monday the 16th. On Thursday the 19th, we have the sun moving into the sign of Aries. This is happening in the evening. This indicates the beginning of spring. Aries is the first sign of spring in the zodiac. So I think the most important thing about this movement is that eventually the sun will be making what's called a square to those Capricorn planets. And squares are of the nature of Mars. So they can be full of conflict. They can be full of tension, of needing to build some sort of resolution. It's tense. It's challenging. And that square won't be exact until the middle of April. That'll be April 15th, when the sun will be squaring Pluto and Jupiter, who will be conjunct, meaning they'll be at the same degrees of Capricorn at that time. And so that'll be a particularly tense day. But in general, the sun will be in a sign that is squaring the sign of Capricorn. So the sun in Aries is a fire sign. It's the beginning of spring. It's all about growth and starting things and moving forwards and taking action and, going off, venturing forth alone, pioneering, usually alone and by yourself. It's about splitting away from the group or cutting away. Aries is ruled by the planet Mars, the god of war, and Mars also rules over knives, things that can cut. So Aries season's going to be pretty intense. It doesn't look like things are really going to lighten up for a little while. We also have to think about where the ruler of the sun in Aries is at this time. So, like I said, Aries is ruled by the planet Mars. So while the sun is moving into Aries, we'll have Mars be in Capricorn. So it's still bringing up those themes of Capricorn, of, there's a lot of fear. Capricorn can be very much about security and defensiveness, and, there can be some fear there as well. Capricorn is ruled by the planet Saturn. Saturn is the lord of, like I just mentioned, winter and death, and it's our fear. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. When the sun will be squaring Pluto and Jupiter on the 15th, Mars will then be in Aquarius. And so that could indicate that, although there's this crisis that's been happening, solutions are on the rise. Aquarius is all about innovation, revelation, moving things forward, being progressive. So, things will be, I think, after the middle of April, leaning towards finding solutions or getting better. I can't really say better, but there's going to be movement for sure. So that's Thursday, the 19th. On Friday, the 20th, we have Mars making a conjunction with Jupiter in Capricorn, and this is happening at 22 degrees of Capricorn. This is where the Saturn-Pluto conjunction happened, at 22 degrees of Capricorn. And Mars is exalted in Capricorn. It functions strongly. And Jupiter is in detriment. It doesn't function very well. It struggles here. Jupiter is normally all about having faith in things and being optimistic and being generous and believing in things, really relying on faith. But, being in Capricorn, Capricorn's about limitation, blockage, cynicism. So, Jupiter in Capricorn kind of struggles. It's, can't really rely on faith. It has to rely on hard work and a little bit of cynicism. But in general, Jupiter as a planet tends to expand or over-exaggerate things. And Mars is our pace, it's our energy, it's how we move through the world, it's our motivation. It's also how we fight and defend for what we want. And so this could definitely be a story about overdoing it. You know, you might feel like you have a lot of energy on this day, but be careful of getting hurt, of overexerting yourself or overestimating. You know, this is a classic confidence signature, like believing you can do something, but taking action preemptively. So, you know, stronger energy levels, but be careful. It could also be about fighting for a belief or a cause. Mars being the god of war, Mars can often act as a martyr, fighting for things that you want, for things that you believe in. And that's where Jupiter comes in, because Jupiter is what we believe in, what we have faith in. And, you know, because it's happening in Capricorn, you know, this is going to involve those darker, more serious themes that we're experiencing right now. So this could definitely involve some themes with the coronavirus. I'm not quite sure, you know, what exactly it'll entail. But, you know, fighting for what we believe in terms of community, in terms of maintaining connection, in terms of helping each other out, making sure that those who are less privileged and you know, those who are struggling can still be protected in some way. That's Mars, protecting and fighting for. It could also be this sense of beliefs and values that seem to be fading, or there could be this sense of wanting to believe and wanting to have faith, but with Jupiter and its detriment in Capricorn, just feeling maybe a little hopeless or cynical, very, you know, cynical, which can be very hard, especially for people who are normally very optimistic. And I shouldn't say only cynical, it's also a planet of realism as well. So, okay, so that's Friday the 20th, and then Sunday the 22nd is a really big day. We have Saturn moving into the sign of Aquarius for the first time. Saturn spends about 2.5 years in every sign. So we've had Saturn in Capricorn since December of 2017, and I'm sure that's when a lot of people started experiencing all the crazy shit they've been experiencing with whatever theme that it's happening in, or whatever house it's happening in for you. So we'll have Saturn in Aquarius until July 2nd, and then it will enter back into Capricorn on that day, because the planets like to move backwards and forwards, and so Saturn will move forward in Aquarius until May 11th, which is when it goes retrograde, and then it'll move back into Capricorn on July 2nd. So Saturn's significations are commitment, duty, obligation, responsibility, tests, trials, tribulations, our fears. It's what we fear in this lifetime. It might be a sense of feeling restricted or limited. It rules over the cold and winter, time and age, maturity. Wherever it is transiting in your chart is where we need to step it up and put in more work, because it's inevitably the place that we will be tested. You know, being the planet of tests and trials, it's where we will be tested in our integrity and how committed are we to this adventure. And then Aquarius is a sign about being an outsider, feeling like you don't belong. And usually this is the case because there's a purpose there. There's a purpose of looking to the future, looking to what could be, what innovations could be made for the purpose of societal progression. Aquarius is very much so concerned with the group, with society as a whole, rather than with the self or with the ego. It's about being authentic and being ego-less. And so with Saturn moving into Aquarius, there could be plenty, there's so many different themes here, but one of them could be a fear of being authentic, of being your authentic self, or a fear of being an outsider, or of being exiled, or of not belonging to the group. And so there's going to be some tests and trials that we will be facing with regards to those themes throughout the next couple of years. I mean, although Saturn will go back into Capricorn in July, it's going to be entering Aquarius officially at the end of the year in December of 2020. And then that's when we'll be experiencing it for a longer period of time. But this is like a little taste of what it's going to be like once it enters officially. Let's see. And it totally depends on where this is happening for you and what house it's happening for you in. Saturn, if Saturn's going to be entering your first house, the house of self, body, identity, this could be, who am I? Who am I really? And am I scared to be myself? Am I scared to be seen a certain way? In the second house, it could be, I need to make money in an independent way. Aquarius, similar to Aries and Mars, splits off from the group to progress things, to move things forward, to bring the new and innovative back to the group. And so it's often a very lonely energy, a lonely sign. So there could be a fear of how am I gonna make money and create value for myself in the way that I want to authentically, that feels true to me. Those are just a few examples. So yeah, that's a pretty big shift. We also have Mercury and Pisces making a sextile to Uranus and Taurus. I already went over Mercury and Pisces themes. It's also a lot about dreams and creativity and communicating with feeling and with emotion and getting connected to our emotions. Pisces is a water sign. Water signs are all about emotion. And Uranus is all about innovation and revelation and revolution and change. And sextiles are really easy, usually, not all the time, but usually the more positive qualities of these energies come about with the sextiles and trines. So with Mercury sextiling Uranus, once again, bringing up innovative ideas, possibilities are opening up. The last time that this aspect happened, because Mercury, right, has been moving back and forth, was on February 5th. That was the last sextile to Uranus. So maybe there's an idea that you had at that time that is coming back up, or maybe there's a solution or a decision to be made. We also have Venus in Taurus making a sextile to Neptune in Pisces on Sunday. So, okay. So this is an example of where a sextile could go a little wrong or could not work so well for you. Venus is how we relate, it's how we experience pleasure, it's how we unite with others, it's how we experience beauty. And Taurus is a physical, it's an earth sign, it's about experiencing the physical pleasures of the body and of the physical world, of what the material world can offer us. So this is about drinking the most expensive wine or eating the most expensive, delicious dark chocolate and really savoring the taste and, taking baths and getting a massage and making love and all sorts of just really enjoying the material reality. It's a really beautiful placement for Venus. Some potential negatives of this, though, could be taking it a little bit too far. Venus and Taurus can sometimes get a little stuck in the bubble bath and, not want to necessarily put in the work, I guess, or work too hard. And then, Neptune is a very tricky planet. It's all about what we mythologize, what we dream about. We can make things glamorous. It's the planet of having rose-colored glasses on. And so Venus being the planet of love and relationships, this could be a time of idealizing someone, of glamorizing them, of not seeing them for who they really are and thinking that you're falling in love. On a more positive note, it could be money. Finances could be made in a creative fashion, or in a kind of a otherworldly way. Neptune is the planet of otherworldliness, and spirituality as well. This could definitely be a day where you overindulge. Neptune and Pisces both rule drugs and alcohol and altered states, and Venus in Taurus is the pleasures of the body. So could be a time where you drink a little bit too much wine or get a little too intoxicated or whatever, just be careful. But also enjoy it, especially in these intense times. And finally, we have Mars making a conjunction to Pluto and Capricorn. So, we just talked about Mars making that conjunction with Jupiter, right? So this is kind of continuing the journey for Mars. So remember, Mars is the god of war. Pluto is the god of the underworld. Pluto is a planet that seeks to purge, seeks to purify. And often it can be quite the uncomfortable process. So, the first thing that kind of came to mind, because this is happening in Capricorn, which is the sign having to do with government and systems and structures and, those themes. This could be perceived potentially as an attack of sorts, Mars being the god of war. That's being revealed to us. Pluto is about purging, about seeing what's underneath things, seeing the truth, revealing things. So maybe some kind of an attack that's being revealed or coming to light with regards to society, with regards to government, with regards to the larger structures that we find ourselves connected with. Mars is our energy, and Pluto is also the planet of power and control and manipulation. So, with these two planets together, there's this sense of overpowering authority or being overpowered or overpowering someone else. So this could be about you feeling powerful, coming into your full authority, or you feeling like you're the victim of that, being controlled or manipulated or overpowered. So there's a lot of different ways that could come out or be manifested or be reflected in our world today. But I can imagine that Sunday, the 22nd, is going to be a pretty intense day. And I think it's going to be part of this story of the coronavirus. There's definitely, the planets reflect our reality. They don't necessarily make things happen. There's not necessarily any causation. We don't know how this works. We don't know how astrology works. We just know through observation, it seems to work. So, just keep safe, and we're in really interesting times. We're going through some really dark times, and I wanted to also talk a little bit about how this is all reflected through the story of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that happened in January of 2020. So the exact conjunction was on January 12th, right? And I believe the first uncovering of the coronavirus was around January 20th, I want to say. So I do think that this conjunction is totally related to this outbreak. And I want to go over some of the history of Saturn, Pluto in the past to kind of give us a perspective of what these themes are about. So remember, Pluto is a planet of the death and rebirth cycle. It's about purging. It's about bringing things to light, shining a light on our shadows. It's about purification through purging and dying and being reborn. It's a tough planet. Saturn is, once again, the planet the lord of death and the cold, the winter, depression. And so when these two planets come together, also Saturn being those systems and structures like government, So when these two planets come together, there's a dying of sorts. There's a destruction of structures, of government systems no longer working, of the status quo, of the traditional, followed by a rebirth of the new, potentially a redistribution of power. And how these planets relate to each other shows us where there's corruption or abuse. Pluto's kind of revealing that corruption or abuse. And these hard aspects between these two planets are karmic in nature. They seek to balance unjust conditions by showing us the collective shadow. And I think that this whole coronavirus outbreak is reflecting part of our collective shadow as a society, as a people, as, just as the human race. So Saturn and Pluto conjunctions happen about every 33 to 38 years. So it's it's not very common. But then, in between the conjunctions, there's what's called squares. Then there's the opposition. Squares are of the nature of Mars. There's usually conflict, challenges, tension, fighting. And oppositions are of the nature of Saturn. There's death, there's endings, there's pulling away, there's butting heads, but not necessarily resolution happening. So I'm going to just start with, August 1914 was the onset of World War I, and that was when Pluto and Saturn conjoined, or made a conjunction, in Cancer. In 1931, we had Saturn opposing Pluto, and this was during the Great Depression. In 1939, this is when World War II began. This is when there was a closing square between Saturn and Pluto. So square, once again, being of the nature of Mars, it's 90 degrees between two planets. And this is also the time when the atomic bomb was developed. So the square indicating the nature of Mars, fighting, conflict, war, the atomic bomb, is a weapon, I guess I should say. Mars rules over weapons. In 1947, we had the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Leo. This is about 2 years after World War II ended, and this is, when the power struggle between capitalism and communism began. This is when there was a division between India and Pakistan. At this time, Israel also gained independence from the British, sorry. And so here we kind of see those themes of division, of redistribution of power, of destruction of structures of government systems, right? And then in 1966 was a Saturn-Pluto opposition, so oppositions being of the nature of Saturn. And this is 180 degrees between two planets. And this is during the Vietnam War, and there was still the capitalism-communism struggle. In 1982 and 83, we had the Pluto-Saturn conjunction again in Libra, and this was the biggest economic recession since the Great Depression. There was also a volcano, I think it's Kilauea, I might be pronouncing that wrong, but that volcano erupted in Hawaii at this time, and it's the longest lasting eruption. This is also the time that the Cold War started escalating, leading to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Saturn, Pluto are dark times, not easy. It's, redistribution of resources, breaking down structures, dissolving those structures that are no longer working for us. And, sometimes this type of thing happens through various modes, through war or through a natural disaster or through a virus, And so the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, once again, happened in January of 2020, and that's when the first case of the coronavirus was discovered. So, we're definitely seeing the underbelly of society at this time, or we're going to be forced to, or we're doing that right now, because this virus is forcing us to, who knows what kind of economic results this will have. Economic depression, people not being able to go to work, schools are being shut down. And how are we going to show up for each other? How are we going to maintain community when we're forced to be in isolation? We're forced to be quarantined. We don't want to spread the virus. So this is a test for us. Saturn being the planet of tests and trials. How are we going to move forward and rebuild society, rebuild the structures that keep us sane to some extent, So I just wanted to put that out there, the idea that this virus is a reflection of where we're at as a collective, as a society. And, I'm a personal believer that things happen for a reason, even though sometimes they absolutely suck and are terrible. And, sometimes I go back on that belief because I'm like, this can't be true. Like, why would something so terrible happen? But it's, this virus is going to force us to take a look at ourselves. How are we going to support each other? How are we going to build ourselves back up? How will we maintain integrity, maintain community and connection? So I just want to urge everyone to, stay safe, but don't respond totally out of fear. Saturn being the planet of fear. Like, yes, it's scary, but we don't want to be overcome by that. We don't want to, how does that really serve us? Of course, fear can serve us by keeping us safe, but overreacting to it can really only serve to isolate us and to separate us, I think. So just some thoughts. There's a lot going on. This week is going to be a big one, super intense, a lot of powerful energy happening, a lot of things happening. Comment if you wish in the comments below to let me know how the week goes for you. I'd love to know. Yeah. All right. Well, I will be back with another update next week and talk then. Bye.